artist working between cinema and assemblage along the Texas coast of the Gulf of Mexico. His practice explores cinematic events through material encounter and sustained co-presence. These works emerge from ongoing research developed during his MFA in the Interdisciplinary Practices and Emerging Forms at the University of Houston School of Arts. Alejandro.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to the Blaffer for generating this space for discussion and content. I would like to start by proposing a way to encounter or to approach these works. They are not objects. They are not objects, and what they are intended to do is be more of a situation. They're not images, at least not in a conventional sense. The approach is to try to generate a situation or generate the conditions that sustain something to happen. That's what I call the cinematic event. That is why the electricity, the materials, the space, all being here present right now, all is forming that event. Everybody here and the work is co-present. So is the building, and so is the air, and the light, and the situation. So I am proposing, I'm materializing these propositions in 3 works. The first one is Troje, which is in the media room in there. Troje is what we call a granary or a grain repository in the north central part of Mexico. So that work is about accumulation of matter, about accumulation of electricity and generating an image. But not an image that represents something. When you walk in, you'll see refineries. But it's not so much about the meaning of those images. It's about the conditions that are being sustained in order for that image to appear. So that accumulation is of material that I've been recollecting for the last 2 and so months, that I've been here in this master's program. It's not precious objects. It is the debris, is the object that is left out of fabrication. It is what you encounter when you're walking in your everyday life. And those things collected try to generate a relationship, which I call assemblage. Not as a collection of things that conform an object, but assemblage as a set of relations, as a sense of relations that is material, energetic, and presential, where everything is speaking to something larger that is basically sustaining the event. And in a way is mimicking how we live, how our surroundings are, what the things that we encounter on an everyday life are, and what are the infrastructures that we require in order for our life to continue. The second work is this one, lecho, which means riverbed. And this is a work about transduction. Transduction as being how matter and energy can transit and convert itself. This is basically a camera capturing light in the 3-dimensional presential world, converting it into an analog signal that passes through a conversion into digital. Then it splits that digital signal into a series of monitors, but also a projector that the camera captures again. So it's cyclical. There is nothing being recorded, and there is nothing linear. It's just a transductive event. And everything is exposed, the cables, everything is exposed, because it is part of the work. It is acknowledging all that is required for the work to happen. So in that sense, it is, like I was saying, it is not an object, it is not an image in a traditional sense, or it is a cinematic event. Cinematic not in the sense of high production value or glossy images, but cinematic in the sense that is moving, that is transiting. Energy, matter, presence, architecture, everything is in a float. No? That's it. If you can, there is three kind of ways to see this work. There is a modality where things that are laid out as a riverbed, as its name suggests. But there is also another view from the main gallery, because the projection exceeds the window. So when you go downstairs and you look up, you will see the light projection exceeding the window, exceeding the container. And the third one is kind of where you are. As you can see, the light reflects and bounces. And it's all creating a feedback. It is creating a feedback in three-dimensional space. And that is essentially how the work is functioning. It has air to cool off the electronics. Everything is accounted for. The third work is outside. It's in the riverbed by the entrance. It is a solar-powered radio that is tuned to a Norteño Tejano music radio station. And that work is called caudal, which means flow, river flow. And that one is about transmission. It's about catching a signal that is among us, translating it, and replicating it into sound. It's about the radio wave, like the water wave. So it is having a dialogue with the riverbed of rocks, just like how a river would sound. And that's where the other radio comes into play. That other solar radio is playing the sound of a river, trying to reactivate those river rocks, how they sound when they are encountered by water, by the flow of water. Now they are here static, but with solar energy and electronics, is trying to revive that sensation, that encounter with nature. So those are the three works. I think of them and I call them assemblages. And I call them assemblages not because they're a collection of things or parts that make a whole. They're assemblages because they're a set of material and energetic relations with no hierarchy. The presence of us, as we are here now, in my mind, is part of the work. And it is part of the assemblage. And just in a way, kind of like an assembly. There's that relationship, assemblage, assembly. So to assemble material, to assemble space, to assemble energy, to assemble presence, all generates what I consider the cinematic event. I think that's all I have. I don't know if that's 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. So to start out, I have a question for you. You were talking about how your cinematic events or your assemblages creates these situations of conditions that are coexisting in this gallery space, right? So how do you want the viewers to experience your work?
I think it's important to think of it as experience. It's not so much about single sensorial modalities like viewing or hearing. It's about being present with it, existing alongside in a continuous space. So, for example, Troje, that is inside that room, as you can see, the light is very dim, and there's a room tone. My intention is not so much to show you something to look at, but to be present with a collection of materials and energetic conditions. So I don't think there is a predetermined or a single way that I envision the audience to look at the work. What I would say is that the works are intended to be co-present with you, to generate a space to slow down, to observe, to feel, to hear, all at the same time, to be multisensorially attuned with the moment.
Thank you. And now, questions from the audience. Yes.
So you mentioned earlier that you you're sort of setting up situations for the viewer to be in. And the situations that you're setting up, maybe in this room over here, can evoke, you know, some sort of emotion from the viewer. Do you design that emotion ahead of time, or is it sort of like an experiment of how people are going to react to this situation you're setting up? And if so, what was the design for the emotion of that space?
Yeah.
That is a good question. No, I don't think of it as design of emotion, because, for example, the works don't take shape until the moment of installation. There is a very raw idea of what's going to happen, but the work takes shape and comes to be the moment that it takes shape. I didn't know how it was going to look or feel before the 3.5 days that we have to install the work. The idea of putting the refineries as the image that is projected happened well in the middle of the installation. So I don't think of it so much as design, or I do think of it as a kind of attuning the space. Attuning the space to generate a possibility. I'm not interested in predetermining that possibility. I'm interested in just setting the conditions that allow the possibility.
So you didn't really anticipate like specific responses or reactions to it?
No, I don't think that's, I mean, once I see it taking shape, I can sense that it has a certain atmosphere, it has a certain feel, and that has to do, yes, with me being there making decisions in the process of installing. But it's not something that is predetermined. Yes.
I love the word you just used, attuning the space. And I'm curious if in the construction of these situations, you ever felt that there was one element that emerged as more dominant than the others, that you had to tune back into making it a more de-hierarchical system, and what that process was like?
Yeah, so if there's like more dominant aspects of the situations that you're creating.
Yes, I try, it's impossible, but I try to remain not judgmental or remain or keep the elements non-hierarchical, but there is realities of life, right? I have to first move materially or put all that matter into the room, and that has already changed the room before the computers are in there, before the projection is in there, before we hear anything. So there is definitely a linearity. I cannot escape that. But that said, the process, the matter, even though it's there, it is not finished, and then something finished happens on top, and then something finished happens on top. It's in constant dialogue. So there's things that come in and are out. The sound changes. I was installing, and then I was like, the room tone is not right, so I was that night rethinking what the sound was going to be. So yes, there is hierarchy, a linear hierarchy because of material realities, but it is always moving, hopefully to generate some kind of metabolic dynamic. Yeah.
Can you describe the emotional and spiritual process that you go through as an artist when you start designing a space and suddenly something invades you that tells you who your refinery is on the wall?
I mean, it's mostly just fear. just being really afraid that it's going to not work. That is really what happens at first. But I think emotion in a larger picture, it has to do with the process of recollecting things over long periods of time. Like the last 2.5 years that I've been here, I walk very often. I walk from where I live to campus, and a lot of the material that you see in there is stuff that I find by the sidewalks, under the freeway, just debris that is left behind from construction, from the generation of infrastructure. There is an emotional component to that because it requires mindful observation over time. It's not just passing through in a very utilitarian way. I have to get from point A to point B because I have a class or I have a lesson. It's being present in the process of getting there, and allowing oneself to be at all with things that you just encounter, that are just there.
Thank you, Alejandro.
No, thank you everyone.